There was a time when Black America gathered around the television set every week to laugh together, to see faces that finally looked like their own. For many families in the late 1970s, that show was What's Happening. Bright colors, funky music, the rhythm of teenage life in South Central Los Angeles, funny, honest, and full of soul. It was the first African-American teen sitcom on national television. A show that gave us Rerun's big laugh, Raj's dreams, Dee's sharp wit, and Shirley's no-nonsense attitude. It was joy in 30-minute doses, a window into a version of Black life that was rarely celebrated on screen. But behind the laughter, there was pain. Behind the success, there was silence. Few people knew that the series was inspired by a film called Cooley High, written by Eric Monte, a brilliant Black screenwriter who helped create Good Times, The Jeffersons, What's Happening, and even The Cosby Show. Yet while his creations built television empires, Eric Monte himself would end up homeless, forgotten by the same industry that once applauded his genius. And he wasn't the only one. The stars who brought What's Happening to life, Mabel King, Shirley Hemphill, and Fred Rerun Barry, each carried their own heavy stories off camera. Fights for fair pay, health battles, addiction, loneliness, and tragedy. This is not just the story of a sitcom. It is the story of how Hollywood can turn laughter into a mask, and how the brightest stars of Black television were left to fade quietly when the lights went out. So tonight, let's rewind the tape and remember what's happening behind the smiles. Before there was What's Happening, before Good Times, before the Jeffersons, there was one man with a notebook, a dream, and a story he wanted the world to hear. His name was Eric Monte, a South Side Chicago kid with nothing but words, and the will to change how America saw Black life. In the early 1970s, television was still segregated in spirit. Black families existed on screen, but only as side characters, maids, janitors, or comic relief for white audiences. Eric Monte wanted to change that. He wanted to show that Black America wasn't just surviving, it was living, laughing, raising kids, fighting for dignity, and building futures. His first big break came with All in the Family. Working under producer Norman Lear, Eric helped create one of the show's most iconic characters, George Jefferson, the sharp-tongued, ambitious neighbor who refused to play the fool. That character became so powerful that it spun off into its own show, The Jeffersons. But few viewers knew that the man behind George and Wheezy Jefferson was a young Black writer who never got the credit he deserved. Then came Good Times, a sitcom about a Black family in the projects of Chicago, built from the same streets Eric had grown up on. He co-created it with actor Mike Evans, and for a moment, it looked like the dream had come true. Black families were finally seeing themselves on television, their struggles, their laughter, their hope. But behind the scenes, Eric was at war with the system. He wanted Good Times to tell the truth, to show the strength of Black mothers and fathers. The network wanted jokes, stereotypes, and the funny, poor Black family. When Eric refused to play along, he was pushed out. By the mid-1970s, his name was removed from projects he helped create. When What's Happening, based on his film Cooley High, hit the air, his credit was quietly buried under legal fine print. It was a familiar story in Hollywood. A Black man builds the foundation, and the industry takes the house. Years later, Eric Monte would file a $300 million lawsuit against Norman Lear and the producers of What's Happening. He claimed they had stolen his ideas and erased his name from the work he created. He won a small settlement, nowhere near justice, but enough to prove he wasn't lying. Still, Hollywood turned its back on him. The phones stopped ringing. The meetings disappeared. By the late 1980s, Eric Monte, the mind behind The Jeffersons, Good Times, and What's Happening, was living in a homeless shelter in Los Angeles. In an interview years later, his voice cracked when he said, "I created stories that gave Black people hope, but when they were done with me, they left me with nothing, not even my name." He survived addiction, humiliation, and silence. Yet even in the depths of poverty, Eric Monte never stopped writing, because for him, the pen was more than a tool, it was survival. And maybe that is what makes his story matter. He didn't just change television, he fought to prove that Black stories belonged to the people who lived them. Before she was Mama on What's Happening, before the lights, the laughter, and the studio audience applause, Mabel King was a gospel girl from Harlem, singing her way through smoky church basements and dreaming of a stage bigger than her neighborhood. Born December 25, 1932, in Charleston, South Carolina, Mabel was raised by a mother who believed in faith and hard work. When the family moved to Harlem, the heart of Black music in America, Mabel found her rhythm in the church choir, her voice rich, bold, and full of power. She sang gospel like it was a calling, but by her mid-30s, she wanted more than Sunday mornings could offer. She wanted the world to hear her. By the late 1960s, she was performing in musicals, first Porgy and Bess, then Hello, Dolly on Broadway. Her big break came in 1973, when she landed a small role in Don't Play Us Cheap, a film by Melvin Van Peebles, the same revolutionary voice behind Sweet Sweetback's badass song. That same year, she appeared in The Haunting Ganja and Hess, a film so ahead of its time it would later be remade by Spike Lee. But her real moment, her defining moment, came in 1975. She stepped onto a Broadway stage as Evil Lean, the Wicked Witch of the West, in the all-black musical, The Wiz. When she opened her mouth to sing Don't Nobody Bring Me No Bad News, the audience rose to its feet. Mabel wasn't just acting, she was summoning. Her performance earned her a Drama Desk Award nomination and turned her into one of Broadway's most beloved performers. Then came television. What's Happening? In 1976, Mabel played Mama Thomas, a working-class single mother raising 2 kids in Los Angeles. She was strong, warm, funny, and real, the kind of mother millions of black viewers recognized in their own homes. In an era when Hollywood too often painted black women as maids or background noise, Mabel's character was love with edges, a protector, a truth teller, a mother who refused to be broken. But off-screen, she was fighting another battle. By the show's second season, she clashed with the producers. They wanted her to remain the overweight, struggling maid. Mabel wanted evolution, a mother who could go back to school, get a better job, show audiences that black women could rise beyond struggle. When the network refused, she walked away. Hollywood called it creative differences. She called it self-respect. After leaving What's Happening, she reprised her role as Evil Lean in the 1978 film version of The Wiz, starring Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, and Richard Pryor. It should have been her second big break, but Hollywood had already moved on. By the 1980s, Mabel's life took a devastating turn. She was diagnosed with diabetes, and complications soon took her toes, then both legs, and eventually one arm. She suffered a stroke that left her partially paralyzed and unable to speak for almost a year. The woman who once commanded Broadway now needed help just to move. Still, she never lost her spirit. Her friends raised money for a custom wheelchair. She even got involved in politics, campaigning for Ronald Reagan's re-election in 1984, a move that surprised many but reflected her independent mind. In her final years, she lived quietly in Los Angeles, depending on friends and faith. On November 9, 1999, Mabel King passed away at the age of 66, her kidneys failing after decades of struggle. She was cremated, her ashes entrusted to her attorney. She had once said in an interview, "All I wanted was for people to see the beauty in us, not just the struggle." And for a moment, through the laughter and the love of What's Happening, she gave America exactly that. She made people laugh for a living, but laughter can hide 1,000 heartbreaks. Shirley Hemphill, the quick-tongued waitress from What's Happening, was more than just comic relief. She was the heartbeat of the show. A working-class black woman with a sharp wit, a big heart, and no time for foolishness. Born July 1, 1947, in Asheville, North Carolina, Shirley grew up watching her hero, the great Moms Mabley, another bold, fearless comedian who came from the same small southern town. As a child, Shirley dreamed of escaping the factory life that defined so many around her. She studied hard, earned an athletic scholarship to Morristown College in Tennessee, and majored in physical education because comedy wasn't yet an option. But even in college, she couldn't resist making people laugh. Her classmates said she could turn a bad day into a comedy show. After graduation, she returned home to work at a factory. But every night, she wrote jokes, and one day, on a dare from her friends, she recorded them on a cheap cassette tape and mailed the tape to Flip Wilson, the biggest black television comedian in America at the time. Weeks later, she received a box in the mail, a new tape recorder, a dozen roses, and a handwritten invitation to visit his show. That was the moment she knew her life would never be the same. In Hollywood, Shirley worked nights at the Comedy Store, waiting tables by day, doing stand-up by night. She often performed after Richard Pryor, a near-impossible act to follow. But her style, raw, real, unapologetically black, caught people's attention. Among them was Norman Lear's team, who saw her perform and brought her onto Good Times. Her one guest spot lit up the screen. Lear was so impressed, he offered her a chance to star in her own show. But Shirley, loyal to her friends, turned it down and instead accepted the role of Shirley Wilson, the wisecracking waitress at Rob's Place on What's Happening. From 1976 to 1979, she became a national favorite. Fans adored her, her side-eye, her one-liners, her energy that filled every room. But fame came with limits. When the show was canceled, she found herself back at square one. She got another chance with One in a Million, playing a taxi driver who inherits a fortune. But the series was short-lived, canceled after just 13 episodes. Hollywood was never kind to women like her, too bold, too black, too honest. Still, Shirley kept going. She toured comedy clubs across America, mentoring young comics, including a young Martin Lawrence and Rosie O'Donnell. When Martin struggled after What's Happening Now ended, It was Shirley who lent him money and told him not to quit, because he was special. Years later, when Martin became a superstar, he brought her onto his show to return the favor. Despite the smiles, Shirley was lonely. She never married, never had children. Her world was the stage, and when the lights went out, she was often alone. On December 10th, 1999, her gardener found her body inside her home. She had died of kidney failure, just months after Mabel King's passing. She was only 52. To the world, she was laughter. To her friends, she was loyalty. But behind that laughter was a woman who carried everyone's burdens but her own. Shirley Hemphill gave the world joy, and the world never quite gave it back. Before he was a television star, before the red beret and the suspenders, Fred Berry was just a kid in the projects of Street Louis, Missouri, a boy who loved to dance. In a world where money was scarce and dreams were small, Fred's joy was movement, rhythm and motion. His mother used to gather family and friends and tell Freddie to show them what he could do. And every time the music started, he lit up the room. As a teenager, he sneaked out of church meetings to hit the discos. One night, he met Don Campbell, the creator of the dance craze locking, a mix of soul, funk, and attitude. Fred joined Campbell's group, The Lockers, a collective of revolutionary dancers who changed the face of 1970s pop culture. They weren't just dancing, they were defining a generation. The Lockers performed on Soul Train, Saturday Night Live, The Carol Burnett Show, and The Tonight Show. They brought street dance into America's living rooms, and Fred Berry became the standout, nicknamed Mr. Penguin. But when disputes over pay and credit arose, Fred walked away. He wanted something bigger. That something came in 1976, when he auditioned for a new sitcom called What's Happening. The role of Rerun was originally written for a skinny white kid, but when Fred danced into that audition, the room erupted in laughter and applause. They rewrote the part just for him. Within months, Rerun became a household name. With his bright smile, red beret, and unshakable energy, Fred was the life of the show. Kids imitated his moves. Adults quoted his lines. He was finally living the dream, the poor boy from street. Louis had become one of the most recognizable faces on black television. But fame is a double-edged light. Behind the laughter, Fred struggled with insecurity and anger. He grew frustrated at the pay gap between the white and black cast members. While others earned $8,000 per episode, he and his co-stars received barely $5,000. When he demanded fair pay, he was labeled difficult. Soon after, the show was canceled. Out of work and feeling betrayed, Fred spiraled into drugs and alcohol. He spent his fortune, cars, houses, jewelry, everything. He said later that he was trying to fill a hole in his soul with cocaine and applause. 3 suicide attempts followed. He survived them all, barely. In 1985, the network revived the show as What's Happening Now. But money and contract disputes resurfaced, and Fred walked away again. Ironically, had he stayed, producers were planning a Rerun and Dwayne spinoff that could have changed his life. Instead, Fred disappeared from Hollywood until he found salvation in faith. He got clean, lost over 100 pounds, and became a minister and motivational speaker in Alabama. He toured malls, schools, and churches, preaching hope. He legally changed his name to Fred Rerun Berry, as if to reclaim the part of himself that fame had taken. In his later years, he returned for cameos in shows like Martin and The Weakest Link, appearing in Snoop Dogg's videos and the Universal Circus. He laughed again, slower this time, softer. On October 21, 2003, Fred Berry died at his Los Angeles home. He was only 52. The official cause was natural, but friends said his health had been failing from diabetes and a recent stroke. His widow, Essie Berry, later claimed foul play, believing he had been silenced before collecting a $5 million settlement in a business scheme. No proof ever surfaced, only whispers. Fred Berry was a man of contradictions, joyful yet tormented, loud yet fragile, a dancer who just wanted the world to see his heart. And when he danced, even for a moment, you couldn't help but believe that life was still beautiful. When the laughter faded and the credits rolled, the story of What's Happening didn't end. It simply moved into quieter rooms, where the stars who once made America laugh faced their own private battles with silence. The sitcom was more than a show, it was a mirror. For millions of black families in the 1970s, What's Happening was proof that their stories mattered, that joy, friendship, and struggle in South Central Los Angeles were just as human as anything on white America's screens. It made people laugh, yes, but it also made them seen. Behind that laughter were souls who gave everything. Eric Monte, the writer who dreamed the dream, lost his home but never his voice. He once said, "They took my shows, but they couldn't take my truth." His words built the foundation for every black sitcom that followed: The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters, Blackish. Each of those owes a silent debt to the man who wrote the first line. Mabel King gave the world strength, a mother who demanded respect, both on and off the screen. She fought for dignity until her body could fight no more, and though diabetes took her limbs, it never took her spirit. Every time an actress today refuses to play a stereotype, that is Mabel King's echo. Shirley Hemphill gave laughter, not the forced kind, but the kind that heals. She lifted others when no one lifted her. When Martin Lawrence and Rosie O'Donnell speak of her generosity, it is clear, Shirley didn't chase fame, she chased connection. And even in death, she reminds us that the funniest people often carry the heaviest hearts. And then, there was Fred Rerun Barry, the man who turned movement into magic. For a generation, he was rhythm personified, the living joy of a people finding their place in America. Behind his red beret was a survivor's soul. Even when fame abandoned him, he kept dancing, on stages, in churches, in spirit. Together, they built something that outlived them. A small sitcom that ran only a few seasons became a cultural landmark, a piece of black television history that inspired the next wave of storytellers. Shows like Martin, The Parkers, Everybody Hates Chris, all carried a trace of that same laughter from Rob's place. Hollywood often forgets the ones who built its bridges, but the people, the audience, remember. Every rerun watched, every line quoted, every smile shared keeps their legacy alive. Today, when we look back at what's happening, we are not just remembering a sitcom. We are remembering a moment when being black and joyful on television was an act of quiet revolution. And maybe that is the truth of it, that these stories, these people, these laughs were never just about entertainment. They were about existence, about carving joy out of struggle, about telling America that we are here, we matter, we have always mattered. So the next time you hear that funky theme song play, remember the names that made it possible. Remember the genius who was forgotten, the mother who stood tall, the comedian who gave until she broke, and the dancer who kept moving even when the music stopped. Because long after the lights go out and the audience goes home, what remains is the soul behind the laughter.